5 years ago. I should have known better than to take the shift at Eclipse that night. The club pulsed with bass so deep I felt it in my bones, and the air was thick with expensive cologne, cigarette smoke, and something far more dangerous, pheromones. As an Omega, I'd learned to suppress my reactions, to blend into the background while serving drinks to Seoul's elite. It was good money, and I needed everyone to pay for my suppressants and my cramped studio apartment. That's when he walked in. Kang Taemin moved through the crowd like a predator, and everyone instinctively parted for him. I'd heard the whispers, the youngest mafia boss in Seoul's history, ruthless, untouchable. His tailored black suit probably cost more than I made in a year, and his dark eyes swept the room with casual authority. 3 men flanked him, their bulges under their jackets obvious to anyone paying attention. I wasn't paying attention. I was trying desperately not to breathe. Even across the room, his scent hit me like a physical blow. Sandalwood and smoke, something wild and utterly masculine. My suppressants might as well have been sugar pills. Heat prickled along my skin, and I clutched my serving tray so hard my knuckles went white. "You okay?" my coworker Mina asked, but her voice sounded distant, muffled. I wasn't okay. My heat wasn't due for another month, but my body didn't seem to care about schedules. Not when an alpha like that was in the room. I should have gone home. Should have run. Instead, I found myself walking toward his private booth when my manager barked orders. My hands trembled as I set down the expensive whiskey he'd ordered. I kept my eyes down, trying to be invisible. "Look at me." His voice was silk over steel, and my body obeyed before my mind could protest. When our eyes met, something clicked into place, something primal and terrifying. His pupils dilated, and I watched his jaw clench as he caught my scent. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice rougher now. "Jaiwon," I whispered, and hated how breathless I sounded. "Jaiwon." He said it like he was tasting it. "When does your shift end?" Every rational thought screamed at me to lie, to run, to remember that this man was dangerous. But my Omega instincts were louder, drowning out reason with desperate need. 2 hours, I heard myself say. The night blurred after that. I remember finishing my shift in a daze, my body growing hotter with each passing minute. I remember Taemin waiting by the back entrance, his eyes never leaving me. I remember his hand on the small of my back as he guided me to his car, not rough, but possessive in a way that made my knees weak. We barely made it to his penthouse before my heat fully hit. What happened next was a tangle of sensations I'd never experienced. His mouth on my throat, his hands everywhere, the overwhelming rightness of his body against mine. He was surprisingly gentle for someone with his reputation, murmuring praise in my ear, making sure I was okay even as we both lost ourselves to biology and something that felt dangerously like fate. I fell asleep in his arms, feeling safer than I had any right to feel. Dawn came too soon. I woke to voices outside the bedroom, Taemin's subordinates, speaking in low, urgent tones. The door was cracked just enough for me to hear. "The Kim family is moving against us," one said. "Boss, they hit 2 of our warehouses last night. 3 men dead." "We need to respond," another voice growled. "Send a message they won't forget. Burn their operations to the ground." Taemin's voice was ice cold, nothing like the warmth he'd shown me hours ago. "No witnesses. No mercy." My blood turned to ice water. 3 men dead. Warehouses burning. This was his reality, violence and blood and death. And I was an idiot for forgetting it, even for one night. I dressed silently, my hands shaking for entirely different reasons now. I slipped out while he was still in the other room planning destruction, taking nothing but my shoes and my shattered illusions. 3 weeks later, the pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. I stared at it in my tiny bathroom, my reflection pale in the harsh fluorescent light. An Omega pregnant by a Mafia alpha. There were no good outcomes to this story. Either I'd be killed by his enemies, used as leverage against him, or trapped in his violent world forever. But as I pressed my hand to my still flat stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing something precious was growing there, I knew what I had to do. I disappeared, changed my name, withdrew my meager savings, and bought a bus ticket to Busan. In a small coastal town where nobody knew me, I found work at a small cafe and a room above a pharmacy. I took my prenatal vitamins and avoided other alphas and tried not to think about sandalwood and smoke. 8 months later, during a winter storm that knocked out the power, I gave birth in the local clinic. The pain was excruciating, but when they placed my son on my chest, small and perfect and mine, I wept with joy and relief. "His name?" the nurse asked gently. "Miho," I whispered, touching his tiny hand. "Kim Miho." He had Taemin's nose, I realized with an ache in my chest. But he was mine. Only mine. "I'll keep you safe," I promised him, kissing his forehead. "No matter what." I never let myself wonder if Taemin looked for me. Never let myself regret what could have been. This quiet life, just me and Miho against the world. It had to be enough. It had to be. Present day. "Mama, why does my teacher say I smell different?" I looked up from kneading dough, flour dusting my hands, to find Miho staring at me with those serious dark eyes. Taemin's eyes, though I'd never told him that. At 5 years old, my son was already showing signs of being an alpha. He stood straighter than other children, spoke with unusual confidence, and had an instinct for protection that sometimes frightened me. "You're special, baby," I said, smoothing his hair. "That's all." He frowned, unsatisfied, but the oven timer saved me from further explanation. This was my life now, our small bakery by the sea, the salt air mixing with the scent of fresh bread, Miho's laughter filling the spaces where fear used to live. But peace, I was learning, was always temporary. The letter came on a Tuesday. The bakery's landlord was selling the building, and my rent would triple. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking, watching my carefully built life crumble like day-old cake. "We'll figure it out," I whispered to myself, but the numbers didn't lie. I couldn't afford to stay. That's when my old culinary school friend Hannah called with an offer, head pastry chef position at Lumiere, an exclusive restaurant in Seoul. The pay was triple what I made now. It would mean going back to the city I'd fled, but we'd be in Gangnam, far from the districts where Taemin operated. Seoul was huge, I told myself. The chances of running into him were minimal. I should have known better than to gamble on chances. The transition was brutal. Seoul swallowed us whole with its noise and crowds and endless concrete. I enrolled Miho in Hanseong Academy, the only school near my work with spots available. I didn't research it properly, didn't realize until orientation that it was where Seoul's elites sent their children. Politicians' kids. CEOs' grandchildren. And apparently, the children of people wealthy donors wanted to impress. Miho's first day, I kissed his forehead and watched him march into the building with his little backpack, looking so small and brave it made my chest ache. "He'll be fine," I told myself and headed to work. The call came 3 hours later. "Mrs. Kim, there's been an incident." The principal's voice was tight. "Miho got into a physical altercation. We need you to come immediately." My heart stopped. I ran the 6 blocks to the school, arriving breathless and terrified. The principal's office was elegant and intimidating, all dark wood and leather. Miho sat in a chair, a bruise forming on his cheek, but his chin was raised defiantly. "Baby, what happened?" I knelt in front of him. "A bigger boy was hurting Sora," Miho said fiercely. "He made her cry. So I pushed him and told him to stop." Pride and fear warred in my chest. Of course my son would protect someone weaker. Of course he'd inherited that alpha instinct. "Mr. Kim, while we appreciate Miho's protective instincts," the principal said carefully, "physical violence is not tolerated. However, given the circumstances and that this is his first day, we're willing to let this go with a warning. Mr. Kong specifically requested." The door opened. Time stopped. Kong Taemin walked into the office, and the air pressure seemed to change. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my month's salary, his presence filling the room the same way it had 5 years ago. Older now, harder, with silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He hadn't seen me yet. His eyes were on Miho. "Where's the boy who hurt my niece?" His voice was cold steel. "Mr. Kong, actually, this young man was defending Sora," the principal said nervously. "Your niece is fine, just shaken. Miho here." Taemin's gaze finally shifted to Miho, really looking at him for the first time. I watched his expression flicker, confusion, then interest. Miho stared back fearlessly, and something passed between them, some recognition that transcended logic. You protected Sora? Taemin asked, his voice gentler now. She's smaller, Miho said simply. The boy was being mean. Taemin's lips quirked in something almost like a smile. What's your name? Kim Miho. I needed to leave. Needed to grab Miho and run before? And your mother? Taemin's eyes moved past Miho, finding me for the first time. I watched recognition slam into him like a physical blow. His entire body went rigid, and his eyes, God, those eyes, burned through me with shock, anger, and something else I couldn't name. Jaiwon. My name on his lips was accusation and question and disbelief all at once. The principal looked between us, confused. You two know each other? Taemin didn't answer. He moved closer to Miho, and my maternal instincts screamed. But he wasn't threatening, he was studying. His nostrils flared slightly, and I realized with horror what he was doing. He was scenting my son. I watched the exact moment it clicked. Taemin's eyes widened fractionally, his hand tightening on the back of the chair. Beneath Miho's emerging alpha pheromones, sharp and young and undeveloped, was something else. Something that carried traces of me, yes, but also something deeper. Something that connected to Taemin on a biological level that couldn't be denied. How old is he? Taemin's voice was barely controlled. I think we should discuss this elsewhere, I said quickly, standing and reaching for Miho. How old? 5, I whispered. The math was simple. Devastating. Undeniable. Taemin's jaw clenched so tight I heard his teeth grind. When he looked at me again, there was fury there, yes, but also hurt so raw it made my stomach twist. Mr. Kong, should I? The principal started. We're leaving, Taemin said flatly. All 3 of us. We have much to discuss. You can't just. I can. His eyes never left mine. And I am. 5 years, Jaiwon. 5 years you kept my son from me. Miho looked up at me, confused. Mama? What does he mean? My heart shattered. Baby, it's complicated. No, Taemin said, and his voice was iron. It's actually very simple. He crouched down to Miho's level, and my breath caught. I'm your father. The world tilted sideways. Miho looked at Taemin, then at me, his young face struggling to process this impossible information. My papa? Yes, Taemin said softly, and I heard 5 years of loss in that single word. The expensive whiskey in Taemin's penthouse office tasted like ash in my mouth. We'd left Miho with Taemin's sister, the sweet woman whose daughter my son had protected, who'd looked at me with complicated understanding when she realized who I was. Now I sat across from the man I'd run from 5 years ago, and his rage filled the room like smoke. Explain. One word, sharp as a blade. I was protecting him, I said, meeting his eyes even though everything in me wanted to look away. Protecting us. That morning, I heard you ordering executions like you were ordering coffee. 3 men dead, warehouses burning. That's your world, Taemin. I wouldn't raise my child in blood and violence. Our child, he snarled, slamming his hand on the desk. The sound made me flinch. He's our son, and you stole 5 years from me. 5 years of his life. First words, first steps, everything. Guilt clawed at my throat, but I pushed it down. And what would you have done? Kept us locked in a golden cage? Used us as leverage in your gang wars? I saw the news, Taemin. The Kim family massacre 3 months after I left. 17 people dead in one night. Tell me I was wrong to run. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe regret. That's different now. I've been consolidating, moving away from. Away from what? Violence? Don't lie to me. He stood abruptly, moving to the window overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. You don't understand the position I was in. The rules of survival. But I've spent 5 years building something different, something cleaner. For nothing, apparently, since the person I wanted to find was hiding our son from me. You looked for me? Every day for 2 years. His voice was raw. Then I forced myself to stop, thinking you'd made your choice. If I'd known. He turned, and the anguish on his face nearly broke me. If I'd known about Miho, nothing would have stopped me from finding you. Nothing. The intercom buzzed. Boss, we have a situation. The Park family knows about the kid. Ice flooded my veins. What does that mean? Taemin's expression went cold and deadly. It means my rivals now know I have a weakness. You and Miho just became targets. Everything happened too fast. Within an hour, Taemin's men moved us to a luxury apartment in a secure building. I watched helplessly as they installed cameras, reinforced the door, stationed guards in the lobby. My small life, my freedom, gone in an instant. This is temporary, Taemin said as his men left. Miho was sleeping in the next room, exhausted by the day's revelations. Until I handle the Park situation. Handle it how? I demanded. More bodies? More blood. If necessary. His eyes were flint. They threaten my son. There are consequences for that. He's not a pawn in your games. No, he's my son. Taemin's composure cracked. Mine, Jaiwan. My blood, my legacy. Did you think I'd just let him go? Let you disappear again? I won't let you turn him into what you are. The slap of my words hung between us. Taemin moved closer, and I smelled that familiar scent, sandalwood and smoke, and hated how my body still responded to it. What I am, he said quietly, dangerously, is a man who protects what's his. And like it or not, you're both mine now. The days blurred into a strange new reality. Miho adapted with the resilience of children, thrilled to have a father who took him to the park with a security detail, who answered his endless questions about fighting and strength. I watched my son gravitate toward Taemin like a moth to flame, saw how Taemin's hard edges softened around our boy. It terrified me how right they looked together. Mama, why were you and Papa not together before? Miho asked one night as I tucked him in. It's complicated, baby. Papa says he would have protected us. That he would have kept us safe. Miho's eyes, Taemin's eyes, studied me seriously. Why didn't you let him? Guilt choked me. I thought I was doing the right thing. 2 weeks into our captivity, because that's what it was, gilded cage or not, everything went to hell. I was making dinner when the lights cut out. Emergency backup kicked in, bathing everything in red, and alarm sirens wailed. Miho! I screamed, running to his room. He was gone. The window was open, curtains billowing. My world ended in that moment, my heart simply stopping in my chest. Then I heard it, voices from the fire escape, Miho crying out. I didn't think. I grabbed a kitchen knife and ran. On the fire escape, 3 men had Miho. One held him while the others dealt with Taemin's guard, who was bleeding but still fighting. I saw red. Let go of my son. I launched myself at them, all rational thought gone. The knife found flesh, someone screamed, and then hands grabbed me, slamming me against the railing. The knife clattered away. The Omega 2, one growled. Boss wants them both. Then the fire escape door exploded open. Taemin emerged like an avenging angel, his gun already firing. The sound was deafening, and I covered Miho's ears as bodies dropped. It was over in seconds, brutal, efficient, terrifying. Taemin pulled us both into his arms, and I felt him shaking. Are you hurt? Either of you? Papa! Miho sobbed, clinging to him. I couldn't speak. Couldn't process that I'd just killed someone. My knife was still in that man's shoulder. Couldn't process how close I'd come to losing everything. Inside. Now. Taemin herded us back into the apartment, already barking orders into his phone. More men arrived, and I sat on the couch with Miho in my lap, both of us trembling. Taemin knelt before us, and I'd never seen his face so raw. This is my fault. I should have moved you sooner, should have. You saved us, I whispered. Our eyes met, and something shifted. The anger and resentment that had filled the space between us cracked, revealing the truth underneath. We were Miho's parents. Together. And nearly losing him had stripped away every defense. I can't do this alone anymore, I admitted, tears finally falling. I'm so tired of being afraid. Taemin's hand cupped my face, his thumb wiping away tears. Then don't. Let me protect you both. Please. Papa. Miho's small voice broke between us. Are you staying now? Forever. Taemin looked at our son, then at me, and something fierce and possessive and almost tender crossed his face. Forever, he promised. If your mama will let me. I thought of 5 years running, 5 years afraid. Then I thought of Miho's face when Taemin taught him to be brave, of how safe I'd felt despite everything. Okay, I whispered. Okay. The safe house was nothing like I expected. Instead of some dark, cold fortress, Taemin brought us to a traditional hammock hidden in the mountains outside Seoul. Wooden beams, heated floors, paper doors that whispered when they slid open. A place where his world of violence felt distant, almost unreal. My grandmother's house, Taemin explained as he carried a sleeping Miho inside. No one knows about it except my most trusted people. I watched him lay our son on the futon with such careful tenderness it made my chest ache. This was the man I'd glimpsed that one night 5 years ago, before fear had driven me away. How long do we stay here? I asked. Until it's safe. His jaw tightened. The Park family made their move. Now I make mine. More killing? No. He turned to face me, and I saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes. I'm brokering a truce, offering them territory in exchange for peace. My lawyer is drafting agreements that will restructure my operations, legitimate businesses, clean money. It's what I've been working toward anyway. I stared at him. You're getting out? Not entirely. But the violence, the gang wars, I'm done. Miho deserves better than a father who might not come home. His voice cracked slightly. I almost lost you both tonight. That changes everything. The days that followed were strange and intimate. Just the three of us in this hidden sanctuary, snow falling outside while we learned to be a family. I cooked meals in the traditional kitchen while Taemin taught Miho basic self-defense in the courtyard. Not to hurt, he emphasized, but to protect. Like you protected Mama, Miho said seriously, practicing his stance. Exactly like that. Taemin's eyes found mine across the space, and heat that had nothing to do with the ondol floor warmed my skin. At night, after Miho fell asleep between us, Taemin and I would talk in whispers. He told me about his childhood, raised by a brutal father in the gang, never knowing softness until his grandmother would sneak him away to this house. How he'd clawed his way to the top through blood and cunning, but had been slowly suffocating in that life. That night with you, he said quietly, was the first time I felt something other than anger or emptiness. When you disappeared, it nearly destroyed me. I'm sorry, I whispered, meaning it. I was so scared. But I was also running from how much I felt for you. It wasn't just biology, Taemin. That terrified me more than anything. His hand found mine in the darkness. And now I'm still terrified, I admitted. But I'm tired of running. The call came on the 4th day. Taemin answered his phone, listened, and his entire body relaxed. It's done. Park agreed to the terms. The truce is official. Relief flooded through me. So we can go home? We can go anywhere you want. He looked at me intently. But I'm hoping you'll consider staying with me. Not because you have to, because you want to. Let me court you properly, Jaiwon. The way I should have 5 years ago. Before I could answer, Miho's excited voice interrupted. Papa, come see the snow. We spent that afternoon building a snowman together, Miho's laughter echoing off the mountains. I watched Taemin hoist our son onto his shoulders, both of them grinning, and something in my chest simply settled. This was right. Terrifying and complicated, but right. That evening, as I bathed Miho, he looked up at me with those 2 wise eyes. Mama, are you happy now? Yes, baby. Are you? I always wanted a papa. He played with the bath bubbles thoughtfully. Teacher Kim said some kids have 2 mamas or 2 papas, and some have 1, and that's okay. But I think having both of you is best. Tears stung my eyes. Me too, sweetheart. After putting Miho to bed, I found Taemin on the porch, staring at the stars. I sat beside him, our shoulders touching. He called you Papa again, I said softly. Not the man or Mr. Kong. Papa. I know. His voice was rough with emotion. Every time he says it, I feel like I can breathe again. Taemin. He turned to me, and the vulnerability in his face stole my words. I love you. I loved you that first night, even though I didn't understand it. I loved you every day you were gone. And I love you now, even though you drove me insane with worry and anger. His hand cupped my face. Let me love you properly. Let me be the alpha you both deserve. My omega instincts sang with recognition, but this was more than biology. This was choice. I love you too, I whispered. I think I always have. That's why I ran. I couldn't bear to watch that love destroy us. It won't. He leaned his forehead against mine. I swear on Miho's life, I'll build something better. For all of us. When he kissed me, it felt like coming home. Not the desperate heat of 5 years ago, but something deeper, a promise, a beginning. We moved back to Seoul 2 weeks later, but not to the penthouse or the guarded apartment. Taemin bought a house with a yard where Miho could play, in a quiet neighborhood far from his business operations. He kept his word, restructuring his empire into legitimate ventures while carefully extracting himself from the violent underbelly. It wasn't easy. There were threats, tense negotiations, nights when he came home exhausted and I'd hold him while he shook off the weight of his decisions. But he never wavered. 6 months later, Miho started first grade at a normal school. Not the elite academy, but a place where he could just be a kid. Taemin walked him to class on the first day, and I watched our son grab his father's hand trustingly. Be good, Taemin said, crouching down. Remember what I taught you? Protect the weak, stand up for what's right, and always come home to family, Miho recited. Perfect. Taemin kissed his forehead, and I saw tears in his eyes that he quickly blinked away. That night, as we lay in bed together, Taemin's hand splayed across my stomach. I can smell it, he said softly. You're pregnant again. I'd suspected for a week but hadn't been sure. Are you happy? Happy doesn't cover it. He pulled me closer. Terrified, grateful, overwhelmed, but yes, incredibly happy. This time, we do it together. This time, he agreed, and every time after. You, me, Miho, and whoever else joins our family. I'm not going anywhere, Jaiwan. Ever. I believed him. Finally, completely, I believed him. From the next room, I heard Miho talking in his sleep. Love you, Papa. Love you, Mama. We love you too, baby, I whispered into the darkness. And for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow.